says that she loves me. Isn't it lovely when the one who loves things is the one who loving?
So here we go. This just us for the last 15 minutes? Is that
Just me and you. Just me and
okay?
you.
So for the listeners out there, y'all should know people like to Karen Hunter, they like to peg me with Tupac as if Tupac is the only person I ever wrote about my life, which is a lie. I also have known Dave Chappelle since 1992. Well, how did you know Dave Chappelle that long, Kevin Powell? Glad y'all asked. He went to high school with a woman that I dated back in the day. They went to Duke Ellington School of the Arts in Washington, D.C., and she always talked about her friend who was the funniest person that she had ever met. It was a young cat named Dave Chappelle, who used to be called the Kid by Whoopi Goldberg. And so I literally followed Dave's whole career from the very beginning to watch him perform in the Washington Square Park in New York City. And when he left, when he was doing the Chappelle show, that he thought the Chappelle show was going to get canceled, like everything else he had done. He actually asked me if I'd be willing to be the narrator for a spoof he wanted to do about the real world. He loved my season of MTV's The Real World, and he was very angry about how I was quote unquote treated. And so, if y'all remember the Chappelle show, they flipped it. It was one white person in the loft with all black folks, and the black folks acted a fool in the spoof. And I always regretted not doing it because I didn't know what he was going to do. I said, I don't want to relive that stuff. But I said it to say, when Chappelle left the Chappelle show, he did an interview, only did a couple interviews. I was the only print journalist he did an interview with. There was a cover story for Esquire magazine that people can look up. And then he disappeared for many years. He literally was out on the road honing his craft as a stand-up. He was popping up doing the Where's Waldo thing at, or like Bill Murray just popping up randomly. And when he came back, I did a cover story for the New York Times Style magazine on Chappelle. So if anyone knows his journey, I do. And I grew up with comedy. One of the few things I had, Karen, as a kid, with Richard Pryor, Gene Wilder, George Carlin, all those folks I grew up with, was laughter. Now, I'm going to say this, I've grappled, because I'm also an ally, as a straight ally to the LGBTQ plus community. As an activist, I've thought about the stuff he's saying. I've heard the pain that's come from people. I've paid close attention to it. And so when I saw this new special, the headlines for it, it bothered me that I was wondering, like they were saying, well, here he goes again. He's trashing disabled people. He's trashing the trans community all over again. I watched it for an hour, and I actually think everyone's a target. And you said it earlier in the show, Karen. I think that there's a couple things that work with comedy. If you can't talk about any and everything in comedy, then where can you talk about it? Number one. And number two, I think that Dave is not a hateful person because I know Dave, but I do think as a proud Black man who said to me in one of the many interviews I did with him, I'm the first person in my generation since slavery not to go to college. Dave literally comes from a history of progressive Black folks, including his mother, who was a pioneer in the creation of Black studies. People don't realize that. If you look up the Chappelle name in South Carolina, he has ancestors who were pioneers in the Black community in South Carolina back in the day. So this is how we come to this kind of social consciousness with a Dave Chappelle. And I think that he was like, you know what? No one's going to tell me what to say, what I cannot say. And he has FU money in the sense that he literally built himself back up after leaving the Chappelle show and people dissing him, saying, how could he walk away from that money? He did it on his own terms. But I really believe that he's trying to have deeper conversations about all of our differences. I'm not defending, I'm just saying what I see and what I hear is that everyone's a target. Everyone, but that's comedy. I mean, when he said that bit, and you watched it, right, Karen? You saw the show?
First of all, the opening bit with Andy Kaufman, Jim Carrey, Norm Macdonald, and the punchline, I didn't expect it. So immediately I was like, okay, I know what this is gonna be, because what I love about the special was that he is trolling everybody. He's trolling everybody. Yeah. And to me, you have to ask the question, do you really believe that he hates trans people? Do you know what I'm saying? As a person that has seen racism, I know what that looks like. Now, there's people that are just ignorant. There are people that, say some things just to be saying it, like a Jason Whitlock or whatever. And then there are people that actually hate, like the people that killed Ahmaud Arbery. Feel like they don't like Black people, right? The cops that busted into Breonna Taylor's house. You wouldn't do that in a White House, or Botham Jean. You wouldn't do that. You know what I'm saying? So like, and there are consequences to that. David's doing comedy like in the way comedy used to be. I think about that Richard Pryor bit where they're going with the N-word, him and Chevy Chase. Yes. That could never happen today. No. And no. To me, comedy was one of those spaces where you should be able to say anything. Yeah. Lenny Bruce, George Carlin, anything. And if you don't like it, turn away. You can't censor comedy, I feel, on some level. I don't think he's just being hateful. But again, I'm not any of those groups to be, sitting there being offended. So if you are offended, I appreciate that. But I thought it was masterful in terms of the doling out of insult to everybody.
Well, and Dave is a masterful storyteller, but also he raised a point years ago that I always think about. Y'all sure didn't have a problem when I was talking about black folks. That all of a sudden, because I'm talking about other people, all of a sudden it's a problem. And again, in comedy, if we're going to go back, then we're going to have to go back and, do we censor George Carlin from back in the day? Do we censor Richard Pryor from back in the day? Do we censor Lenny Bruce from back in the day? I think that, of all the art forms, like for me as a poet, is different. Like I have a responsibility that's different than a comedian. A comedian's job is to make us laugh and show us the absurdities of different things. Now, I understand as a black person, yep, Richard Pryor, I mean, I'm talking about Dave Chappelle, I'm sorry, do I have a problem at times with the N-word? Absolutely, because I've heard it 1,000 times. You know what I'm saying? But I'm like, you know what? I can't tell this person what he can and cannot say because I don't want anyone to tell me what I can and cannot say as a poet. But I also know that my job as a poet is different than a comedian's job. It's comedy. It's comedy. It's comedy. And I thought it was irresponsible of the media to say, here he goes again. I mean, before I even got to watch it, it was like he's just going. I was like, he talked about a range of things. I mean, if we're gonna get, he just Baltimore as far as I'm concerned. Remember when he talked about Baltimore? He said Tupac and
Oh
the
my
famous.
God.
He's
Oh,
like, he said they left Baltimore because Oakland was a better shot at life for them. I was like,
yeah,
hey.
yo, yeah. I mean, I felt like Chris Rock got the biggest blow.
Yeah,
If we're being honest, he doesn't come out looking good. But what's interesting? I post clips of this show, this 3-hour Monday through Friday show on YouTube, and invariably there's people outraged in the comments about something. And then my simple question is, do you listen to the actual show? And it's crickets because to take something out of context, like I'm
yeah.
seeing the media do, you're gonna take one joke, one bit, 1 2 minute here. You gotta look. This man wrote something. Like I see the story arc of what he all the way to the end. He comes
Yeah,
back at the end. Like that's a full hour of work that was put in. He put work in on this
I
to
agree.
take one joke 2 minutes and then say this is what it. Nah, you got to sit with it. I'm not saying I was falling out laughing, but I said this was well crafted, well thought out, and he is absolutely trolling everybody, which makes it even more masterful. And he could give a F. Like what he's saying to the world is, you're not going to tell me what I can and cannot talk about as a comedian.
And as
And if you don't like it,
and
turn the channel.
and as a black person, a black man who has a lot of pride, you're not going to tell me what I can and cannot say. I am not a slave, which was the whole point. If you go back and watch the Chappelle show and those sketches, that was the point of that show. I mean, one thing Chappelle said to me back then was that, I create from the imagination of who I am. And I'm going to say it again. This is someone who both his parents were scholars. He comes from, middle class Black America. He came from possibilities and race people, all those types of things. You don't get that kind of comedy if you don't come from you have that kind of diverse background that he has. I mean, this is someone who grew up in the DMV. He has, his father and he has his black siblings. He has folks from other races, including white folks who are siblings of half siblings of his. And so it's not as simple as he hates anybody. I think what Dave is an explorer, and it makes a lot of people uncomfortable. And I think again because he doesn't care at points like you're not going to tell me what to say. It looks like he's being mean. It looks like, and I think the people who are really mean are the folks who are banning Black history, who are banning, things like, things for the queer community in this country, the folks who actually have the power to make stuff happen. You know what I mean? And I think that what Dave has been trying to do is like, let's have a conversation, but people are so bent out of shape. They don't even want to have the conversation, some folks. And as you said, Karen, a lot of people are not even bothering to watch the whole thing. They're getting sound bites and like, here he goes again. And I think that is actually not democracy at the end of the day. Whether you agree with it or not, at least listen to the whole thing and have some thoughtful conversations about this art that this person's creating. He didn't just pop up. He's been around for 30 years. And if you really paid attention, Dave's been doing this his whole career, which is poking the bear.
That's right.
That's what he
That's
does.
right. That's right. I'm making a commitment this year. We're going to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. So help us, God, in the sense there's going to be we're going to have full conversations. We're not doing drive-bys. And I was demonstrating that with one of the callers today. It wasn't about the
Yes.
caller as much as it was our responsibility to get it right, to not just utter not just be outraged, not just respond, but to like sit is it at his core. You know, do you think what's his goal? To get rid of all trans people? Does he hate trans people? Does he want to eliminate the world from there? Or is he saying something deeper, or maybe not deeper? And maybe you don't like it, and that's fine too. Like, once we can arrive at, I just don't like his comedy, that's fine. Now, find a comedy that you like. Maybe it's Michelle Buteau, maybe it's, maybe it's Wanda Sykes, maybe it's something else. But at the end of the day, I think all of the things should be out for us to talk. Let's not burn books. Let's not let 2024 be a mirror of what the daughters of the Confederacy or the mothers of liberty, whatever the hell they want to call themselves. Let's not be a black version of that, especially in our own community.
And he's not talking about, I've watched all the stand-ups, and have I cringed at times? Absolutely. But he's not talking about hurting people in any form. Now, people could say, well, his comedy helps to get people hurt. Okay, does it? Or is what happening in this country, where we see these laws being passed, is that really what's hurting people? Are these acts of violence being motivated by Dave Chappelle? Or they've been being motivated by incredible ignorance that existed long before Dave Chappelle ever existed around racism, around sexism, around homophobia and transphobia? I mean, are we scapegoating him? And we got to think about that. We got to be very careful what we're saying here. Doesn't mean he's not above criticism. Everyone should be criticized, but we're dropping all this on one comedian. I think that says something about all of us, if that's what we're doing.
Yeah, 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 yeah. I run my fingers through her hair as she smiles and says that she loves me. Isn't it lovely when the one who loves